the most important question that we all should ask ourselves is, why do you need to write the grant? If you truly need that money to protect your time, then yes, you need to get that money. But I think a lot of times the lines blur between writing grants and getting funding to check a box to show growth and trajectory of the success versus actually needing that amount of money to do the science. And I think it's easier to get funding from industry or health systems and other resources because federal grants are so competitive and there's so much of good science happening.
When saving lives is what you do, your standards are anything but standard. In fact, you set them higher than most to deliver results that patients can depend on. You refuse to compromise. We couldn't agree more. We are Edwards Life Sciences, and like you, we believe that good is never good enough. Rising to the challenge of today's TAVR patients isn't just a mission, it's a commitment. And because you set a higher standard, we set our sights on meeting you there. Welcome to the higher standard, your standard. Learn more at edwardstavr.com.
You're listening to Parallax from Radcliffe Cardiology in association with makeadent.org. Here is your host, Ankur Kalra, MD from the Cleveland Clinic.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Parallax. This episode is, on the cusp of Diwali. So, for anyone and everyone who's listening, wishing everyone a very happy Diwali. If this gets released post Diwali, the wishes are still true, and from the bottom of my heart. So with that, I'm going to get started on introducing the guest for today's show. So this guest, we share a very special bond. I've known him for over a decade, actually. I would say on the cusp of about 14 years. We first met each other back in New Delhi in India when I was a house officer at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So that would be an intern in US language or lingo. And this fine gentleman was my medical student. And little did we know that, after almost 14 years, we would be sitting next to each other and having a conversation on Parallax. So without much further ado, my guest for today's show is Dr. Pandey. Ambarish Pandey is a cardiologist and assistant professor of medicine at University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. So that's a premier academic medical center and institution for not only cardiovascular medicine, but many other specialties and facets within medicine. And Ambarish has had tremendous success in developing a career as a clinician, physician, investigator. He has tapped very successfully into a multitude of society databases and has consistently featured in many Young Investigator Awards. And, I believe is now a funded investigator. So Ambarish, welcome on the show, and thank you so much for doing this. I am so happy and I'm so pleased to have you as a guest on Parallax today.
Thanks, Ankur. Thanks for the kind introduction. It indeed is a nice, reminiscing all the way back to our days in AIMS, New Delhi, when I was a medical student and you were a busy house staff on the medicine service. So it's kind of nice to think back down the memory lane and now be talking about our careers and our path in the last 10 to 14 years. So thank you so much for having me on this platform. The honor is all mine to be able to talk here about my journey so far and share some of the interesting aspects of my journey and hopefully provide some, insights into how we can navigate a successful academic career for young investigators like myself, particularly those coming from India and other countries and trying to find their footing in the United States academic milieu.
Great. So Ambarish, let's just jump right in. So medical school from, the best medical school in India, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi. And then when did you decide that you wanted to have a career, or, at least contemplate a career as a physician in the United States?
Yeah, I think I was lucky to be one of the few who got into AIMS as a 17-year-old, I guess, just graduating from high school. And after the euphoria of getting into medical school settled down, and that was around the whole first year of med school, around second year when I started getting into the thick of things with the clinical rotations and pathology and pharmacology and other subjects, I did start thinking that I really like research and the discovery aspect of medicine. And that's when I started thinking that maybe the best place for me to pursue further in my career would be in United States. And I was again lucky to get a away rotation as a third year medical student at Johns Hopkins. And I spent 2 months in a basic science lab in cardiology at Johns Hopkins. And that was pretty much when I loved what I did for those 2 months and was fairly certain that I would want to pursue my further training after med school in United States. And then I started making sure that get all the steps and other things in order, do away rotations, and then pursue the path forward for residency training here.
Excellent. So residency was where? Was it at UT Southwestern?
Yeah, so I came here actually before residency. I did a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Medical School in a nanomedicine lab with Dr. Shiladit Sen Gupta. And then during that time, I applied for residency for internal medicine, and again was lucky to get into UT Southwestern Medical Center for internal medicine residency, and have stayed here since then for fellowship training, masters, and now as faculty. So yeah, residency did happen at UT Southwestern, and so did subsequent trainings.
So, I mean, UT Southwestern Medical Center internal medicine residency is arguably the best, has been voted in the past as the best internal medicine residency training program. And, I'm sure they were happy to retain you as a cardiovascular disease fellow. Now, your postdoc years at Harvard Medical School, and, even, coming back to medical school days when you visited Johns Hopkins at 2 months, for 2 months, tell us or describe to us the rubric of research that you were involved in, because, what you do now is, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe it's on the translational aspect, but it's mostly on the outcomes aspect, as I've seen your work, and a lot of it is, garnering new information, novel information and data from society databases. But, tell us about dabbling into basic research as a medical student. Then, tell us about, nanomedicine research as a postdoc, and how those experiences transformed into some of the thought processes you may utilize in conducting the kind of research that you do nowadays.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it does actually take my mind back to when I was applying for research electives at different institutions in the United States as a third-year medical student. At that time, I knew I wanted to do cardiology and nothing beyond that, mostly due to lack of experience with the field, including research. And I was lucky to get into a lab that did mostly basic science, and I did 2 months on novel stent platforms that were drug-eluting stents. And that time, drug-eluting stents, this was 2005, were pretty much becoming standard of care for interventions. And I was lucky to be involved in the lab that was at the cutting edge of that research. And then when I spent 2 years there, I really enjoyed basic science, and I really enjoyed the lab work. Obviously, 2 months is not enough to get anything meaningful other than a good experience. So that experience prompted me to take more time and develop a little bit more of my basic science skills. So I applied for a postdoctoral fellowship after medical school and got into the lab of Shiladit Sen Gupta, who was a very up and coming, bright young investigator who had a nature paper as a postdoc and was really excited about the work he was doing. And I was just happy that I had someone like him as a mentor at that time. And I did his lab was fairly broad focused. He did work on tumor vasculature and tumor drug delivery and targeting nanomedicine formulations of drugs into tumor tissue. While my interest was mostly vascular biology and cardiovascular diseases, the interface of studying how tumor vasculature works was exciting, and we did do some really good work there on angiogenesis and tumor cells and things like that. And during that time when I was in his lab, I actually presented a paper during our journal club from Science, which was looking at vascular and cardiac regeneration in mice, like neonatal mice right after birth. And that was that study was one of the best studies that I had come across at that time, and was done by an investigator, a cardiologist at UT Southwestern. So when I had spent like a month preparing for the journal club, and I got so excited by all that was done, like cutting out the apex of the heart in the mice, and all that seemed so cool in terms of just doing such research. And I was like, this is the place to train. This is the place where I can really learn a lot more about cardiac regeneration. And so UT Southwestern was on my radar after that. And I actually came to UT Southwestern to do basic science. And my goal was to work with Hashem Sadek, who was one of the best in the field of cardiac regeneration. And I guess it was destiny that when I came to UT Southwestern as an intern, I spent 5 months in the ICU, worked with some fantastic clinical cardiologists and clinical researchers like James Salimas, Dan McGuire, Jared Berry, who were all leading investigators and were doing some really cool epidemiological research, outcomes research. And intern year was so busy that I never really got time to spend any day in the lab. And just the mentorship that I got and the exposure that I got just naturally had me gravitate towards clinical research and epidemiological research on cardiovascular diseases. And the strength of UT Southwestern was Dallas Heart Study. And that's where I really learned my bearings of clinical research and got exposed to it. And then I liked it so much that it just evolved further and further into more database-based work and understanding novel epiphenomenon and novel ways to understand disease epidemiology using large data sets.
Yes, I mean, some of the work that you've done is truly fascinating and has found its home in some of the leading cardiovascular medicine journals. And before I sort of get into the specifics of the kind of work that you've done over the recent past few years, tell me a bit more about the importance of, I think one is identifying your true passion in research, because, and I particularly asked this question for, medical students, also house officers, residents, fellows in training, also early career, because, I think it takes a while for you to truly find A, what you're passionate about, and B, what you're good at. And I think a combination of what you're passionate about and what you're good at is what determines, I think, continued success and productivity and also consistency. Because otherwise, I mean, I see a lot of peaks and troughs in the careers of many, physician investigators, and someone like yourself who's been consistent for so many years, for so long. There's got to be A, passion, and B, you have to be good at what you do because you do it so well and so consistently. So for you, how did you find that niche of, epidemiology and database driven research? I think that is a crucial question, at least. I mean, the fact that I asked this question, I think it's crucial for me as a colleague, physician investigator of yours, but also I think for many who are listening, because, I think that's a vexing question many of us have.
No, I think that's the exact same question that I was dealing with at different stages, and I think it's something that evolves over time. And I would say I was extremely fortunate to land in a place where there was opportunity to follow a lot of what I wanted to do, because there's good infrastructure with database work and great support in form of mentors and statistical opportunities and things like that. So just acknowledging the opportunities that I got, I think It's important to realize, for me per se, I would say I am more of a curious researcher, and a lot of my work is driven by curiosity and problem solving. My passion is fairly broad, and in terms of disease process, I would say I'm really interested in heart failure, but that's a very broad, I guess, focus. And I would say around that, I love to solve problems that exist in different domains, from prevention to outcomes to how do you alleviate disparities. And the curiosity is what has kept me going and helped me find new avenues to find solutions to different problems that exist and develop best possible ways to answer questions. And in the process, the curiosity also keeps me honest, because if something doesn't work, it doesn't deter me too much. Or if a project fails, I move on to the next question or the next important problem to solve. And I guess in a way, it keeps me honest, and it keeps me motivated to keep solving problems rather than delve too much onto one success or one failure. So I think that has been something that I would say was helpful in many ways, though not conventional in form of what you hear about other researchers, where most work is driven by passion, not curiosity. But in my case, I would say it was more of curiosity, and then passion was more broader and more clinical work around heart failure, and then finding the question that you want to answer just worked out in that way. And I think it evolves over time, and you have to be pragmatic. You have to adjust yourself to available opportunities. If you may be really interested in randomized controlled trial, but as an early care investigator or as a trainee, it's almost impossible to do a meaningful RCT that will answer a question in a way it should. So I think you have to be pragmatic, and you have to also tailor your efforts towards the available opportunities, and then find the best outcome from there, and then build on it. And I think it's a marathon, and I think you can build your career in blocks instead of in one stretch. And I think as long as all your work and your efforts are directed towards one larger goal, I think it all is justified and it all works out. And having that in mind, I think not aiming too high, but also making sure that every question that you answer or every project that you do takes you a little closer to the big prize or the big goal that you have in mind, I think helps a lot. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And, thank you for answering that question so honestly. There is something you said there, which, I'm not sure, if you're aware how much of a gem that pearl was, at least for me. And, that is, you mentioned success and failure and not being too attached to it. And, I think for me, success is moving from one failure to the other with the same level of enthusiasm. And I think that's sort of the message that I got from what you said, when you made comments on both successes and failures, and having the curiosity to move from one project to the other, even if one project fails. That is so crucial. That is such a gem. That is so relevant. And that's sort of been my approach. I mean, as you were describing it, I was sort of thinking about what you were saying, because, if someone were to look at my body of work, it's broad-based. It's got patterns and themes to it, but there isn't a particular, topic that you would attribute me to. I mean, you probably would have seen that I've published on a myriad of topics. But, like yourself, what's motivated each of those projects is just curiosity to find more about the truth, behind the question that you've asked. And, also, having the ability to move from one failure to the other with the same level of enthusiasm, is what truly, I think, makes you, a good clinician, physician, investigator, in my opinion. And that's the reason why you've been so successful repeatedly and consistently over the years, as I've seen your career progress and flourish. So Ambarish, tell us, so now getting into the project specifics, and I really want to use this opportunity to highlight the various, awards that you've won at the early career stage. I mean, you've sort of hit pretty much all the Young Investigator Award categories that I'm aware of. And I really want to use this platform as a learning opportunity and an experience for those who are listening who are in the same boat in terms of how they want to develop their career as a physician, clinician, investigator, and sort of look up to early career folks like yourself, who've done so well. So tell us more about those opportunities and also tell us about the specifics about some of the awards that you won.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect of my career so far. I think a lot of the opportunities I was just lucky to have the right network and the right connections through my mentors and collaborators. And I think a lot of I would say big picture, how I look at anything is it starts with a question. And if I have a question in mind and I think it's an important question to answer, it is something that I'm curious about, but it also affects patient care or the way we think about the disease process, then I kind of lay out a map of what is missing or what do we need to answer this question. And as I think through it, I look for the key personnel or the key programs that have had success in answering questions around this specific topic or have expertise and resources that can be helpful. And then you identify the key players or the key partners, and then you reach out to them. And at this stage, I think with the way the world is connected, particularly cardiology, it's not hard to reach out and find collaborators who are like-minded and driven to answer similar questions. And then once you have a sort of a team and access to resources, then you just pursue your the problem solving, leveraging those resources, and then if it works out, then you have an answer, or at least or you have more questions that need to be answered with more work. So I think that's kind of the big picture approach I take to answering these questions. I think the awards are not as, I guess in my mind, they're not as relevant as outcomes. They are more like byproducts. And the way I look at it is if there's a conference or there's an award competition happening, it gives me a timeline of sort, and it keeps me on track for getting things done before that presentation or that competition happens. So I use it as something to introduce more structure in my approach and something to keep me on a timeline and a track. And if people find the award, if people find the work interesting, it leads to some fruitful outcome, which I think the knowledge is more relevant than the award itself. And I will say that it may seem, if you look at my profile, that I've won a lot of awards, but I've also failed a lot, and I've failed more than I've won, and that is always true. And for me, I will emphasize this for all young investigators, that success is absolute and success is personal. You should never look at success in relative terms, that, oh, I haven't won as much as I've applied for, or my strike rate is lower, things like that, because the more you apply, the more you try, the more you get out of it. But I think you have to count and value the victories as absolute victories and not as, oh, this came after 10 efforts, or I was rejected for 10 other journals or competitions before I got this one. And I think that is something that keeps me going, is I value the victory as an absolute and on a personal level, because there's always going to be some other investigator, some other program, or some other better data set which you could have used and you couldn't get access to. But I think as long as you keep it more personal and more absolute, I think it helps you be motivated for the next question and keep doing better and better work.
Yeah, no, excellent answer. And I think, just to drive home the point that I made earlier, and that was, that, success to me at least is moving from one failure to the other with the same level of enthusiasm. And, I agree with you. I mean, I've personally I've applied for so many of the awards which I haven't received. And, it's a long, drawn out application process, as you're aware. Many of these, young investigator and early career awards have lengthy applications, and, your letter writers do a terrific job in putting together letters, and you sort of have a compendium of documents to collect and organize and submit. So it takes a lot of effort. I really liked your point on the fact that it keeps you honest in terms of getting the projects moving. I do think that having a timeline of sorts is crucial to getting projects done in a timely fashion. So I think, like you said, I really like the approach of considering an award as a catalyst for getting your projects done in a timely fashion. Now, whether or not you actually win the award is truly is a byproduct, as long as you're getting the work done and getting the work out there, which is going to benefit, both physicians and patients alike. I think if that is the motivation and that is the goal and that's the mission, then everything else that happens is a byproduct, as you mentioned. So Ambarish, excellent answers, and let's move to your foray into applying for R01 and federal funding, and tell us more about the process. Again, for someone who was introduced to the process early on, I think it could be a game changer, for some of us who, have had clinical careers, because of what we do within cardiovascular medicine, particularly, procedural fields like interventional cardiology or electrophysiology. Early career may not actually support you becoming a federally funded investigator, because you want to use your time as an early career interventionalist or electrophysiologist in honing your skills in the cath lab. So I'm not sure about that many federally funded interventionalists, and correct me if I'm wrong, and please introduce all of us to the process of applying for federal funding. But what were some of the early steps you took to be successful in this direction? What were some of the seeds that were sown early on in your career that led you to this path? What were some of the hurdles that you encountered? And how much of a process this truly is in terms of how arduous it is? Because I think it's a deterrent to a lot of people who want to at least, put pen on paper and want to at least start writing for a grant application. But so many are intimidated by the process, and obviously a lot of us do not have the mentorship. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important step in development of any academic physician scientist, is obtaining funding to do what you want to do. And I always tell my mentees and my colleagues that somehow research and academic setting is so structured that you have to take care of everything you need, from mentorship, finding collaborators, finding money, and then finding time, using the money to fund that time, and then still doing work at home away from family, so that you can keep writing grants to get the money, to fund the time, to do the work. It's just a vicious cycle. And I have taken a slightly different approach towards academic medicine and towards research. And for me, early on when I was graduating from my fellowship, I asked some tough questions for myself. I was like, why am I doing this? This is going to take a lot of time, a lot of my time away from patients, away from family. And what is in it for me that makes it worth it? And I realized that for me, it's the questions and it's the problem solving, and it's the community aspect of research where you work with like-minded investigators, like-minded trainees, and ability to connect with trainees and like-minded collaborators and discuss scientific problems. That is the most rewarding aspect of my academic medicine and research. And so I wanted to make sure that I enjoy that process. I have enough time to develop a project. I have enough time to interact with collaborators and trainees, and just enjoy the process rather than just move from writing one grant to another, and funding for fund and keeping the ship afloat for research. And I realized, and a lot of it was because of the mentorship and guidance I received from my mentors like James Lemos, who never wrote a R01 grant, but has been one of the most successful investigators that I know of. And he told me that it doesn't matter how you fund your science, as long as the science is good, the question is important, people will value the work you did. No one ever is going to ask you after reading your paper, by the way, what funded that paper? So he told me that, and I kind of liked his philosophy that try to be judicious about amount of time you spend writing grant versus doing the science or actual work that you find so rewarding. And so that's the approach I took. For me, it doesn't matter where the money comes from. If a health system is interested in investing X amount of dollars in developing novel approaches to predicting heart failure and preventing heart failure. And that's what is exciting to me. I would take that opportunity and do that work. And similarly, if industry funding is coming to do a specific question that I'm interested in, I would take that opportunity and take the money. And it keeps me have a more flexible schedule, do control my time better, and also answer the questions I want to answer. So a lot of my work initially, right after fellowship, was funded by health system startup grant and then some industry grants. And then over first 2 years, I started developing interest in questions that are not as lucrative for health systems or industry. And that's where I needed support from federal grants. And then I wrote a grant on, I think, racial differences in fitness decline that got funded as a Gemstar Award from the National Institute on Aging. And so it was a career development RO3 that I got, and that's still active till end of this year. And that was my first federal funding. And then I'm now working on writing RO1s. And I think the most important question that we all should ask ourselves is, why do you need to write the grant? If you truly need that money to protect your time, then yes, you need to get that money. But I think a lot of times the lines blur between writing grants and getting funding to check a box to show growth and trajectory of the success versus actually needing that amount of money to do the science. And I think it's easier to get funding from industry or health systems and other resources because federal grants are so competitive and there's so much of good science happening. It is becoming harder and harder to get those federal grants. So I think as long as you can get your work done by society, foundation money, or whatever, I think go for that. Try to always come back to the question, like, what is keeping you up at night doing research? And I think as long as you can answer that, it doesn't matter where the money comes from, as long as you're able to do what you need to do to answer the question.
Yeah, no, I really liked how honest your answer was. That is something which, as I've dabbled into research and as I've, checked several boxes in terms of, getting money through philanthropy or getting money through industry or getting money through institution, all of which, these are all the resources that I've used for getting research done. The one box that I haven't checked is federal funding. And, quite frankly, I have not had the mentorship early on in my career to write federal grants. And, I know there's a certain pathway for writing RO1s, and I have not had the opportunity to do that. And obviously, there have been some other logistical issues, surrounding, applying for federal funding. But I think the one answer which you gave, which truly resonated with me, and I think should be the take home for listenership and everyone else who's tuning in to listen, is, just focusing on getting the science done and focusing on answering the question that you asked. And, as long as your science is relevant, as long as your question is relevant, as long as the motivations behind asking that question are relevant, and it moves the field in the right direction, it moves it forward, I think I agree with you. I think where the money came from is going to be secondary. It's not going to be as relevant as the science itself. So I think, the kind of work you do and the amount of effort you put into getting that work done, and the quality of work in terms of the veracity of the data, I think all of those are extremely important questions and much more important than getting your study federally funded. So thank you for that. That was a very honest answer. That was a very, I think, important answer that you gave. I think personally for me, and I'm sure it may be true for many others who are listening. So Ambarish, what's next in the horizon for you? I think, for someone who is early career and, maybe transitioning from early to mid-career, and for someone who's been so successful in early career, this question has two parts to it. The first part is what's next for you on the horizon, and then second, what are some of the tips you would like to share with others in early career who want to emulate your success?
Yeah, I think what's next in my career is something that I think a lot about these days, and I'm just kind of at the cusp where I'm trying to transition, or I am transitioning from this early career phase to more mid-career phase. And last 3 years as a faculty have been extremely busy, and obviously surviving the COVID pandemic times and the changes that it brought into our lives have also made me think through the priorities and what I want to do and how I want my next few years to be. And I think I am actually trying to answer that question for myself. I do know one thing I do want is everything I do has to be better than what I did before and has to be more impactful, has to help more with patient care or have create more knowledge and more information. So I do want to keep pushing the envelope in terms of the questions that I answer. So that does mean moving myself from predominantly database or epidemiology focused work to more implementation work or patient based research, prospective work that is actually testing questions in a pragmatic but real world setting where we try to answer different questions that help improve patient care. So that's something that I've been thinking about. And obviously, projects of that magnitude require more funding, more support. So finding time and avenues to get those resources has been on my mind, and just also understanding how to better balance work and life. And I think finding a bit, I'll be honest, I've not done a great job with finding the optimal work-life balance, and it has had its toll, and it has, I have missed out on many things in family, have not had time to travel back to India. And I think all that bothers me and all that I want to fix in the next phase or next few years of my career. And I think just finding that better balance, but not losing the impact or actually increasing the impact of the work that I do, which may mean being more selective with the work I do and just being more, I think, more thoughtful about the things I invest in intellectually and with my time moving forward is something that I'm working on. And the second question was regarding some tips for the early career investigators. I think it's hard. If someone asked me, "Oh, would you do anything differently?" I would say, "Yeah, a lot of things I would have done differently in the last 5 years." And maybe that may have meant a very different productivity profile, but also it would have meant better work-life balance. I would say think and think hard about what's important, and then and focus on it. That you have you're not defined by papers you publish. You're not defined just by the academic profile. You have life outside it. So I think prioritize things there as much as you prioritize your work. And that is, I think, something I want to do more for myself. And I would say early career investigators should hopefully consider that more as they plan their careers. And then I think other thing is saying yes to too many things. I think I am guilty of saying yes to too many things and taking on opportunities and taking on roles that were given to me just because I wanted to be a doer and a finisher and wanted to get everything done. And now I think back and I often look back at my like bibliography or when I'm preparing my NIH biosketch, and I'm like, I could have done without these 20 papers that I spent probably weeks on, and they didn't really add much. But at that time, you don't have that foresight, and I think you end up doing things that, in retrospect, could have been more of a time sink than the reward that they gave you in terms of the work. So I think prioritizing better and being more judicious in saying yes and being okay with saying no, even to your mentors, your sponsors, to any society for things that you may think is taking more time than the reward it is for you. And I think those are the things that I would do myself differently. And I think when we are in the thick of things, we often lose sight of, oh, it may be a lot more time than I think it is, but I think, and it eventually ends up being a lot more time than the reward you get out of it. So I think just being more judicious about what you say yes to and what you sign up for is important. And that means taking on roles that you're not compensated for in societies and elsewhere. I think that's also an important consideration to have. Is it meaningfully advancing your career? Is it worth your time? And I think just thinking a little more than just, oh, it's a good opportunity, let's do it kind of an attitude, which a lot of us, particularly those coming from outside, have, and because we just want to get the work done.
Yes, I can't tell you how much those answers have resonated with me because, I've sort of been on the same boat. It just seems like that, the two of us have been on the same boat. It's just that we've been riding on parallel boats, but haven't shared a boat yet. And I hope that changes. But I agree with you. I think just saying yes to every opportunity that comes our way is I think just a second nature for a lot of the foreign graduates who come in and want to make a mark and prove, I think, more to themselves than to anyone else, quite frankly. I mean, having gone through the process, through all these years and now looking back, I think it's just, that yearning of making a mark and proving it to yourself more than anyone else. So it's just internal validation than external validation that you're worth it, that you can do it, that, you've earned it and you've come this far, and you sort of want to, just like you said, be a finisher, be a doer, keep your head down and keep working. But I think I agree. All of these things take a toll, on work-life balance, personal life, family life, time you spent with your kids. All of that is important, right? I mean, I was reading a quote that you're replaceable at work, but you're not replaceable at home. So I think you have to take life outside of work, equally seriously, in my opinion. And thank you for sharing that so beautifully and with a lot of honesty and humility and candor. It's really appreciated and well taken. Any closing remarks, Ambarish? This has been a fascinating talk. It's been great getting to, touch base with you and spend this time with you. Any closing remarks for our listenership, for Parallax, for the greater audience?
No, I think this has been a great 40 minutes for me as well. Just knowing that how a lot of us share the same ride. It's just we do it not knowing there are other fellow companions on different boats right next to you. And I think just connecting more and networking and just doing work together can make the ride a lot more enjoyable and a lot more fun. So I think that this is really important for early career investigators. And you're not meant to solve any problem alone. And we're not meant to cure heart disease alone. We're not meant to even do anything alone. So just try to find the right people to work with. Try to develop your group, develop your cohort of people that you enjoy working with, that make the ride fun, because you may or may not get the desired outcome from any exercise, any research project. But I think the ride has to be worth it, because even if the outcome is great, but you had a lot of stress just getting it done, it's not ideal. And I think you want the ride to be enjoyable regardless of the outcome. So I think finding the right company and the right collaborations and the right group of people that you closely work with is really, really important. And I was blessed to have that. I was blessed to have colleagues and collaborators and mentors and trainees who have been the biggest source of reward for me. And I think it's that which has been more important for me than all the awards and the papers which are there. But I think it's the process that was so much more worth it, that I think I still remember when I think back of not the rewards and not the awards that may have come as byproducts. So I think that aspect is important. And then I can't emphasize enough finding the right work-life balance and finding your priorities into how much time you want to invest in things that keep you away from family is key. As you mentioned, you are replaceable at work, but you don't want to become replaceable at home either, because that's the worst. So if you're irreplaceable, enjoy it and make sure that you maintain that status by investing more time with family, with your kids. And I think that is key.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, Ambarish. Thank you so much for this, and congratulations to you on all your successes. And hopefully we can get to work on a project together soon. I know we've been talking about this for years now, but haven't really had a chance to work on a project together. But I hope that changes in 2022.
I hope so too. And I think thank you so much for the opportunity to have this dialogue on your amazing platform. I've followed it for years, and I've always been inspired by the people you have had conversations with, and I've learned a lot from their experiences. So I hope some of what we had discussions about helps other listeners who may be in the same, maybe going through the same process as we have. And I hope this is informative for them. So thank you again, and all the best to you for all your future endeavors as well. And you've been a total maverick in terms of innovation and doing multiple things. So I continue to be inspired by your work. So, and I look forward to collaborating with you as well on hopefully more than just research, but actually making more of a dent than just in the academic space.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Thank you, Ambarish. Really appreciate your words, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, produced by Radcliffe Cardiology in association with makeadent.org. We aim to bring you a new angle of all things cardiology every second week. Review us on your favourite podcast app, or send your comments or questions to podcast@radcliffe-group.com. To view the series, head to radcliffecardiology.com/podcasts/Parallax. Thanks for listening.